Ko hau e mea nei, the truth is dead, long live the truth. The truth is that there's way too much ugly in this world. I'm so over ugly, and I've got something to say about that. Ati he mauri ora. Tuatahi mā koe mihi kaua tuani ke o koutou, kua kara pine pine mai ki tātahi ki raukawa. Ki tō tātou mautere. Ata wai whakapiti o tararau ko rangitāne. Tēnā koutou huitahi atu anō ki a koutou e mātaki mai ana I whenua ke I kāinga ke mauri ora ki a tātou. I kīnei o etahi o tātou mātua tūpuna nā te pō, ko te ao, ko te waiata tia o te atua. Some of our Māori ancestors talk about, in the very beginning, we moved from a state of nothingness to a state of darkness to a state of light. I'm one of those who kind of believes that while the old people said that, they also said that along with this journey, we were accompanied by sound, te waiata tia o te atua. With much hindsight and the experience and science and wisdom of many other people, I suggest that sound could be the near inaudible vibrations thrumming at the subatomic level. So that when Western science talks about, everything started with a big bang 14.8 billion years ago, my native mind starts thinking, nah, it actually started with a wee hum before the bang. Māori systems of knowledge and its taxonomies are defined by whakapapa, an accrual of layers of everything over time and space. Everything is woven into a magnificent lineage of vertical and horizontal proportions. It's the ultimate family tree of us. Now, 2,300 years ago, the Greek philosopher Aristotle tried to define his own simple ways of considering the complexity of everything. And he broke up all elements in the universe and in the world into two categories: things and facts. This is an apple, the apple is green. Aristotle also decided to investigate ways of discovering truth, and this was the beginning of the scientific method. He wanted to find what was the origin, what was the essence of things, and what was the cause of facts. And he could also be wrong. According to the prevailing attitudes of the day, if a stone dropped on the ground, because the gods created everything, it was merely returning home. Or if the stone was rolling along flat ground and suddenly stopped, it did so because it was tired. Now in 1666, the Englishman Isaac Newton, apparently on the spectrum and a chap of uncommon focus, watched Aristotle's apple drop out of a tree and asked himself, why does that apple fall perpendicularly to the ground? It was Newton's special genius and leap of imagination that also led him to the question, does the moon fall towards the earth? Does the earth fall towards the sun? What he discovered by way of motion, mass, and gravity explained the apparent fatigue of the rolling stone. Everyone used to think that, in the West at least, Sir Isaac Newton was the greatest scientist that's ever been. Until at least the 20th century, when Albert Einstein, another chap apparently on the spectrum, taught us about space and time. What Einstein did enabled us to understand the mind-boggling bigitude of the universe above and the weird on-off quantum universes that exist at a sub-molecular level within every single thing. Their achievements happened because of Aristotle's beginning to think about the importance of measurement and observation, leading to processes of logic, experiment, and deduction to certify the truth as being true. Or as my kaumata paraima te para te pā used to say, titiro, titiro, titiro. Look, observe, see. To which I would add, whakarongo, 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 because I believe in sound. Now these two words don't just talk about the avenue to the eyes and through the eyes and the ears to your heart and your mind. These words talk about our senses, to feel, to taste, to smell, to perceive. Ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao, ka rongo te ao, ka rongo te pō. So when I tihe mori order myself into a new day, into my own curated world of enlightenment, it doesn't take too long before I come across much that's dark and ugly. A lot of it comes to us on our devices. We're bombarded with stories that reveal the ugly all around. A lot of it's bullshit masquerading as the truth. A lot of it isn't bullshit at all, and unfortunately is the truth. Like the fact that the stories that insinuate themselves into our minds and hearts are often motivated by a fetish for prestige, power, and profit. It's a thing. The worst of us becomes apparent when we see on the daily the ugliness of those words and actions that are directed at the vulnerable and the weak. The ugliness of politicians and their media mouthpieces who push hateful and disingenuous agendas. The ugliness of world leaders with no empathy and no shame. The ugliness of the unalloyed greed of the business of business is business. We look aghast at America because we see there what seems to be the epitome of the attack on collective truth and trust. And it's jollied along by chronic bigotry, the celebration of ignorance, and the valorization of violence. All these hypocrisies and cynicisms exist everywhere in the world, but in America, because of the Constitution and freedom of speech, it's just more apparent. Their amplified bad behavior is exported to the rest of the world. Here in Aotearoa and Te Waipounamu, we are not immune from vile behaviors. Remember the mosque massacre on March 15th, 2019? Now a global meme and a clarion call for people who believe that the white races face extinction? Remember the men and women who are abused because of their tāmoko, because of the religious gear they wear? Remember those children who are diminished and dismissed because they speak their own language? Remember the yellow peril? Remember the Eurasian fluff? This kind of intolerance and hatred comes from people who actually think it's okay to be as ugly as this. Not for the first time in the whakapapa of world history are we now witnessing what happens when the weak attack the strong. When there's a line drawn between them and us. That axis of evil that separates them and us has become apparent in war. It's the most destructive impulse of our species and leeches us of our humanity. Here's a brutal poem about rape. The little daughter lies on the mattress, dead. How many have been on it? A platoon? A company? A girl's been turned into a woman turned into a corpse. Thus wrote Alexander Solzhenitsyn as he watched fellow Soviet soldiers raping German women at the end of World War II, 1945. In April of this year, during Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, a telephone conversation was recorded between a Russian paratrooper and his wife and released to the news by Ukrainian intelligence. The soldier Roman Bukovsky says to his wife, or rather asks permission if it's okay to rape Ukrainian women while he's on the job. They laugh, and she says, that's fine as long as you use contraception. He says, harasho. Cool, okay. Evil, ugly. And as terrible as though that is, that may well be fake news, alternate facts. In every war, propaganda is designed to make the other side look less than human, so that when it comes time to kill, self-righteous anger can pull the trigger. And while we discuss what's true, what's not, who leaked the story, we dismiss conversations that must be had about rape being a weapon of mass destruction no less than the nuclear option. It's hard to come to terms and understand all of this, but we must. We must. We suffer conspiracies from none other but the darkest angels of our own selves. But it's not all bad. In face of all this dystopia, I've decided I'm a pessimist who's willing to be pleasantly surprised, and I'm an optimist who knows that assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. For me, at this time in my life, I look for the truth, but I don't find the truth that I want, or I better my life in the worlds of culture, media, politics. I'm finding truth that turns me on in the world of science and of art. We're an amazing species. We're an amazing species. How infinite in faculty, in form and movement. How express and admirable. One of the basic elements of our beginnings, we think that we're a social species, we think that we're a loving species, but it didn't always start out like that. Way, way, way back in the day when we were primates, we lived solo or as couples. By the time we became Homo erectus and got up off on our back legs and started using what would become our hands to make stuff, we started developing language. We started knowing how to work with fire and make better food. By the time we became Homo sapiens about 300,000 years ago, we grew our brains by 80%. We used language. We worked and acted in concert. We did things collectively. We hunted down dinner. We built a village. Now, to be able to do all that requires us to be able to accept and understand the value of our fellow human being. Empathy. And it's one reason why the most intimate greeting in the Māori language is simply tēnā koe. There you are. I've been a media professional for 40 years working in broadcasting film, and I believe storytelling is an art form. I believe a powerful story is art. I believe in the enduring power of stories and the written word of good and excellent journalism. I believe in the intimacy of the voiced stories of radio. I believe in the political power of primetime television stories. I believe in the emotional, intellectual, and spiritual power of stories on the big screen. He mana tō tērā wahanga o te reo, tō tērā wahanga o te reo, tō tērā kauinga kōrero a te tangata. But we've been paying attention to the wrong stories. In a world of gross inequalities, only 63% of people have access to the internet. We define ourselves by what we experience on our screens, but the problem is this. As a species, the first thing we need is food, and then shelter, and then we need each other, and then we need stories, because stories are the glue that ties us all together. But now when we're suffering the individualization of us, the glue is coming apart. But despite this, I have hope for us as a species. If we look at the history of war and in the history of even in Russia, it wasn't so long ago, just over a generation ago, that in the era of perestroika and glasnost, the Russians started looking for openness and expressing who they were and voicing their protest. In Leningrad, or now St. Petersburg, in the early day of the resistance, which eventually led to the downfall of the Soviet regime, citizens would gather to voice their protests. The authorities didn't like it, and they put a big brass band next to the protesters to drown them out. Interestingly, there's a physiological empathy where if you yawn as a human being, it makes other people yawn. You can catch yawns. There was an activist called Ekaterina Podolskeva who understood that if you ate a lemon, it made the person next to you salivate. So one day, all the citizens of St. Petersburg were starting to get together to protest at the Kazansky Cathedral. The big band was there trying to drown them out. The band suddenly found themselves surrounded by Russians eating lemons. The musicians generated too much spit. They couldn't play their instruments. The band went mute and the crowd played on. As Russia must do again, and as we must face down the ugly, and what it takes is love. I'm not just talking about love, the romantic, the affectionate, the sensual, although that's a part of it. I'm talking about love as a creative force. Hatred destroys, can't run the long game, and always shoots itself in the foot. The beauteous attraction of love brings us together and helps recreate ourselves to be better. And I know this because I used to have 27 cats. But I wasn't silly about it because I only let 13 of them stay inside. And this was my wake-up moment, because I could see that with this little society around my feet, I could see all sorts of human behaviors acting out in the cats. This is Blue. He's the top cat. He really is a charismatic leader. One day Moby Dick came along. Moby Dick was skanky, smelly, had no fur, and had been abused, but was too scared to come onto the property. And he's kind of hanging around the back. But Blue started putting himself in position so that Moby could somehow feel that he was a part of it. And one day when Blue sat beside Moby, Moby knew that he was a part of the team, and the cats were expecting him. Now, the thing about all of this, of course, is that one of the things I've learned is not so much about their humanity, but my animality. Because we go way back and we're all joined, and it's so damned molecular. It's just like any lonely electron with a negative view on life reaching out across the plasma membrane to woo a proton with a positive attitude. We all reach out and dance. And as much as, we consider the wonderful things that science has done, we go back to our roots and our traditions. Kua hau tēnei. Te hokai nei takutapu wai. Ko te hokai nuki, ko te hokai rangi, ko te hokai nā tō tūpuna, nā tāne nui a rangi, nāni piki ake ai ki ngā rangi tūhā, nāni riro mai ai ngā kete o te wānanga. Ko te kete tuatea, ko te kete tuairi, ko te kete aranui. Ka tiri a ka pau a ki papatu anuku. Papa te waititiri, heko tauira. Rū ana te whenua. Niwa te rā. Niwa te rā. Ka puta tira tangata ki te whai au ki te ao marama. And just like a baby, newborn, reaches out to the light and the love of his or her parents. And just like the aged near death reach out for a light only they can see. And just like a waka travels to the horizon to take the people to a new future. And just like our gods stride the stars in the heavens looking for knowledge of the seen, the unseen, and of potential. And just like we and our inner mystical selves search for the essence of ourselves, we all want to be at one with the unfurling of creation. We all want to belong. Since the very beginning, the first stirrings of the universe, the multiverse, since the hum and the bang, we've become, as Richard Feynman says, atoms who contemplate atoms. We are astonishing. At the moment, we're operating a drone on Mars, 54 million light years away. We've parked an amazing telescope on the other end of the other side of the moon to take photos of the universe. When this photo... This photo, 2019, was the first photo of a black hole. That is 55 million light years away in the galaxy M87. The speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second. That's 53 million light years away. That's a long way away. That's a hell of a lens. It took several radio telescopes based on Earth to do that. Collaboration. For as many black holes and galaxies and stars that exist out there, and there are hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars, and God knows how many planets surrounding them, there are as many stars up there as there are drops, or as there are molecules of H2O in 10 drops of water. The vastness of our existence is something that's been explored by science. These are atoms. There's something very spooky about, oops, Ted. But atoms and black holes, they kind of look spookily similar to me. These are the truths that our science is investigating at the moment. And if in the march towards enlightenment we encounter turmoil and chaos, we do so because as we acquire knowledge, we learn how to handle it, what to do with it, and how to use it well. But at least after the storm, there's always the delicious promise of new beginnings. Niwa niwa te rā. Niwa niwa te rā. Every day, I see the majesty of us. That too is the truth. And nui anō wai au, i a koe. Tēnā koutou, e heke nei.